The studio was too quiet for a morning show. Cameras were rolling. The lights were perfect. The crowd had been warmed up. But when Denzel Washington leaned forward, hands clasped, eyes unmoving, even the makeup artist in the wings stopped breathing. Across from him, Michael Strahan still wore the practiced smile of a seasoned TV host. But it didn't reach his eyes anymore. The interview had started like all the others. A red carpet recap. A few light questions about Denzel's latest film. Studio laughter. Applause signs flickering on and off like traffic signals. Then Strahan had tried to pivot. And Denzel, he said, with that trademark charm. You've always had this air of mystery, man. People wonder, who is the real Denzel? Behind the roles, behind the camera, who are you really when no one's watching? Washington tilted his head, just slightly. That's supposed to be a question or a setup, he asked. The smile on Strahan's face faltered. No, he said quickly, just trying to give folks a look behind the curtain. You know, fans love to feel connected. Denzel didn't blink. You mean they like being sold something? The temperature in the studio dropped 5 degrees. No disrespect, Strahan said, laughing a little too loudly. Just saying, this is GMA. We like to have fun. Keep things light. And I came here to talk about the work, Denzel replied. Not to feed the brand. The control room paused. Cut to wide shot. A producer whispered. Wait, another said. He's doing something. Back on stage, Strahan was shifting in his seat. Well, the people are curious, man. Like, your faith, your politics, your take on the Oscars controversy last year. These are the things folks talk about. Denzel smiled, finally. But it wasn't warm. They talk because they're told to, he said. And most of what they're told to care about is distraction. Strahan held up his hands, playing it off. Hey, I get it, I do. You don't want to get caught up in the noise. But people say when you stay silent, you let other people write your story. Denzel leaned forward. They can write whatever they want, he said quietly. But I don't answer to clickbait. The audience wasn't sure whether to laugh or applaud. Neither did the crew. Strahan glanced off camera, hoping for a rescue. Nothing came. So just to clarify, he said, voice tightening. You don't want to talk about anything personal? Denzel didn't hesitate. I want to talk about craft. Discipline. The work that outlives the moment. I've been in this game for decades. If people still need a soundbite to know who I am, then they haven't been paying attention. One of the producers slowly reached for the cut to commercial button. Strahan nodded stiffly. All right then, let's pivot back to the movie. But Denzel wasn't done. No, let's not, he said. Strahan blinked. Excuse me. Denzel stood. I'm done with this show, he said. The audience gasped. One person clapped, unsure. I don't do soft sells. I don't do rehearsed controversy. And I don't owe anyone a packaged version of myself. You wanted Denzel? You got him. He turned to leave. Cameras kept rolling. Michael Strahan sat frozen, lips parted, unable to fill the silence. And in homes across the country, millions watched as one of the most respected actors alive reminded the world of something very simple. He was never here to perform. He was here to tell the truth. And he just did. The cameras kept rolling long after Denzel left the chair. Michael Strahan sat frozen in his seat, blinking toward the crew for direction. None came. The control room was dead silent. In the production booth, someone finally whispered, "Did that just happen?" But the question didn't matter. It had already happened, live, in front of millions. 3 hours later, the clip was everywhere. Denzel walks off GMA. Strahan left speechless. Legend has left the room. But what the headlines missed was the real moment. The moment Denzel stopped being a guest and started being a mirror. For the network. For the culture. For everyone watching. It wasn't about walking off a set. It was about walking away from a machine that no longer told the truth. In the days that followed, producers scrambled. PR teams drafted statements. GMA issued a bland apology. We respect all our guests' perspectives. But viewers weren't buying it. They had seen something too rare to forget. A man refusing to be packaged, refusing to be softened, refusing to smile through a script he never agreed to. Behind closed doors, executives were furious. He humiliated us, one insider reportedly said. Live TV's built on flow. You don't just walk out on a segment. But that was exactly the point. Denzel hadn't come to promote. He came to warn. And when the questions got cute, when the tone turned casual, when the spotlight started bending toward gossip, he did what most celebrities are too afraid to do. He stood up. Not loudly. Not emotionally. Just enough to make the silence unbearable. For Strahan, the fallout was immediate. Tabloids claimed he was shaken. That after the cameras cut, he paced backstage for over 20 minutes, refusing to speak to anyone. One producer said he kept replaying the moment on a monitor. What did I do wrong? He asked. But the answer was obvious to anyone watching. He tried to corner a man who spent 40 years avoiding the trap of persona. He tried to peel back a curtain that had already been nailed shut, not out of secrecy, but out of principle. Denzel doesn't do vulnerability for applause. He doesn't cry on cue. He doesn't sell authenticity in exchange for airtime. And when someone like that decides a moment is over, it's over. No commercial break. No recovery shot. Just silence. The kind that lingers. The kind that says more than any interview ever could. 3 days after the walkout, a new narrative began to take shape. One that went deeper than headlines or hot takes. This wasn't just about an actor leaving a talk show. This was about an institution getting called out. Good Morning America had always branded itself as family-friendly, easygoing, light but informative. But for millions of viewers, especially older ones, the format had started to feel hollow, overproduced. Too many smiles, not enough truth. And in the middle of that artificial calm, Denzel Washington had done the one thing nobody expected. He told the truth. Not by shouting, not by preaching, but by refusing to participate in the lie. The questions hadn't seemed malicious. Not at first, but they weren't neutral either. They were shaped, designed to draw out something headline-worthy, something viral. His faith, his politics, his silence during controversies. And that was the problem. Because silence isn't absence. Sometimes it's resistance. When Strahan asked him to share the real Denzel, he meant the version that would fit the screen. A vulnerable moment. A quote to package. Something that could be clipped, subtitled, and reposted across platforms. But what he got instead was something far more dangerous. A man who refused to be useful. In living rooms across the country, viewers sat a little straighter. Many of them had watched Denzel grow from bit parts to lead roles. They'd seen him play flawed men, holy men, violent men, broken men. But they had never seen him break character in real life, because he didn't have one. No alter ego. No celebrity mask. Just the work. And now, at a time when most stars had become brands, and most interviews felt like PR performances, he had broken the fourth wall. He had stepped out of the frame. And for a generation raised on authenticity but starved of it, that moment hit like a thunderclap. TV critics called it tense. Industry insiders called it hostile. But older viewers called it something else. Necessary. Because what Denzel reminded them was simple. Not every platform deserves your story. Not every question deserves an answer. And not every smile on camera means respect off camera. Michael Strahan had tried to stay above it. His apology on Instagram was brief. I have nothing but love and respect for Denzel Washington. We've all had moments where things don't go as planned. He remains a legend. The comments were mixed. Some defended Strahan, said he was just doing his job, keeping the show running. Others were less forgiving. You invited a master, one comment read, then tried to reduce him to a moment. That was the difference. Denzel didn't come to sell. He came to speak. And when he realized the space wasn't built for truth, he left. No dramatics. No storming out. Just a simple truth delivered in silence. This is beneath me. And somehow, that was louder than any speech. By the end of the week, the ripples had become waves. Inside ABC's offices, meetings stretched late into the night. Senior producers were grilled. Talent coordinators were called into closed-door sessions. Every second of the Denzel segment was rewatched, analyzed, dissected. They weren't just looking for mistakes. They were looking for answers. Why had the tone shifted? Who had approved the question list? And most importantly, how had they underestimated him? Denzel Washington had been in the industry for over 4 decades. He had weathered scandals, dodged traps, and navigated a Hollywood machine that chews up actors twice as sharp as him. He knew exactly what this was. And he had treated the entire segment like what it truly was. Not a conversation, but a performance. One that demanded a mask. A softening. A cell. And he said no. Not with anger. Not with outrage. But with something far more dangerous on live television. Dignity. Producers tried to reframe it. They pushed talking points to friendly media. It was just a miscommunication. Denzel misunderstood the segment. There was no disrespect intended. But it didn't work. Because the audience had already decided. Clips of the moment. Denzel's long pause, his cold stare, his quiet, "I'm done with this show," had been shared millions of times. Not by gossip accounts or TMZ, but by ordinary people. Retired teachers, blue-collar workers, faith leaders, fathers, veterans, people who had spent years watching culture erode into performance. People who saw in Denzel something they'd almost forgotten existed. Restraint. Power without spectacle. Integrity that didn't bend for applause. One comment summed it up best. He didn't yell. He didn't walk out angry. He just stood up. That's how grown men move. And that terrified the industry. Because if one A-lister could get away with it, others might follow. Behind the scenes, agents called their clients. PR managers reviewed every upcoming interview. Talk show hosts were briefed. Avoid religion. Avoid politics. Avoid anything that might make a guest feel cornered. Because suddenly, the rules had changed. Denzel had exposed something the audience already felt. Most interviews weren't really about the guest. They were about the brand. The clicks. The moment. But what happens when the guest refuses to play? You get silence. And for a platform built on chatter, that's death. Strahan, for his part, kept a low profile. He canceled his next scheduled appearance. Didn't show up on Friday's episode. A spokesperson said he was under the weather. Insiders said otherwise. He was rattled. One staffer admitted. He thought Denzel would ease up once the cameras rolled. Smile. Laugh. Play along. But that's the thing about real ones. They don't play. By Monday morning, the entire network felt it. Not just ABC. Not just GMA. The whole ecosystem. Producers at The View canceled a scheduled segment with a political actor. The Today Show quietly revised its upcoming guest questions. Even streaming platforms began holding last-minute review meetings about tone. Nobody said it out loud. But behind every decision was the same unspoken fear. What if they pull a Denzel? Because it wasn't just that he walked out. It was how he did it. No speech. No accusations. No theatrics. Just a single look, a pause, and a sentence that landed like a verdict. "I'm done with this show." Older viewers understood the moment instantly. It was the look a father gives when he's been pushed too far. The kind of silence that doesn't need volume to be heard. That final, settled stillness that says, enough. You don't come back from that. Network executives held emergency calls. The questions weren't creative. They were legal, structural, branding-oriented. What are our protections if a guest shuts down a segment? Can we change the way we vet? Should we revise the pre-interview policies? But none of those answers mattered. Because Denzel hadn't exposed a policy gap. He'd exposed a moral one. A system that asked you to smile while being poked. That dressed exploitation as curiosity. That sold privacy as public property. And the moment he refused, the machine buckled. For GMA, the backlash wasn't immediate, but it was everywhere. Letters came in. Not tweets. Not memes. Letters. Typed. Handwritten. Mailed with postage. From retired nurses. Former servicemen. Longtime viewers who had started each morning for 20 years with the same anchors. Until now. "You lost me," one read. "Disrespect is easy to spot," said another. "If this is how you treat men like him, how do you treat the rest of us?" Michael Strahan didn't respond. Privately, he asked to be taken off the next two segments. Not because of health. Not because of scandal. Because, as one insider whispered, he couldn't fake it anymore. The moment haunted him. Not the walkout. But the look. That slow blink. That silent calculation in Denzel's eyes that said, "I don't need this." "You do." It reminded Strahan, and the world, of something we used to know. Fame is not the same as respect. Access is not the same as understanding. And being on TV doesn't mean you've earned the right to ask. By Thursday, something shifted. Not in the headlines. Not in the ratings. But in the tone. Talk radio, particularly stations catering to older audiences, began dissecting the moment. Not as celebrity drama, but as cultural breakdown. "This wasn't just a bad interview," said one host in Atlanta. "It was a man refusing to be disrespected in public. And that used to mean something." Callers flooded the lines. Veterans. retirees, fathers, men who had spent decades working jobs where dignity was the last thing they were allowed to ask for. They recognized the maneuver, a setup, a soft cornering, where a man is expected to open up, not out of trust, but out of pressure. And when he doesn't, when he defends the sanctity of his own silence, he gets framed as cold, difficult, hostile. But Denzel never flinched. He didn't yell, didn't storm off. He just ended the transaction. I'm done with this show. And for millions of Americans who had felt that same quiet insult in their own lives, in workplaces, boardrooms, job interviews, it was more than just a viral moment. It was a mirror. Even church leaders spoke up. A pastor in Detroit played the clip during a Sunday sermon. You don't need to fight every battle with noise, he told his congregation. Sometimes you win with posture, with poise, with a look that says, I see the game you're playing, and I won't participate. The congregation nodded. Some wept, because they knew this wasn't just about Denzel. This was about the erosion of respect, the commercialization of character, the way today's media invites black men to perform their pain and punishes them when they don't. At ABC headquarters, damage control turned to paralysis. No press releases were helping. No spin could reframe the clip. And worst of all, Denzel wasn't speaking. No interviews, no rebuttals, no Twitter notes, just silence. A silence that forced the world to fill in the blanks with their own conscience. And that's what made it so dangerous. Because in a media landscape addicted to confession, refusal becomes rebellion. And Denzel's refusal had become contagious. Other guests began canceling. Writers sent notes ahead. Nothing personal, but I'll pass. A-list actors stopped doing light banter segments. Publicists called in new demands. No personal questions. No ambushes. No viral setups. The GMA model was cracking. The trust was gone. And all it took was one man standing up without saying a word. The next week, it happened again. Not on live television. Not with flashing headlines or social media outrage. But quietly, at a film festival in Boston. Another actor. Another press panel. A host tried to push the boundary. Let's talk about your personal transformation these last few years, she said, smiling. The actor paused, then answered with 5 words. I'm not here for that. The room fell still. Because everyone knew what was happening. The Denzel effect. It had begun. And it wasn't about ego. Or theatrics. Or media bashing. It was about something older. Simpler. Nearly extinct in modern public life. Boundaries. Denzel had drawn a line, not with noise, but with composure. Not by demanding silence, but by creating it. Not with insults, but with discipline. And suddenly, every outlet, every producer, every anchor who had once laughed off the moment was rethinking the game. Because the public wasn't laughing. They were listening. And older Americans? They weren't just listening. They were nodding. For decades, they had watched the erosion of dignity in real time. The rise of clickbait. The loss of manners. The way television turned serious people into props and deep conversations into punchlines. So when Denzel Washington, a man they had watched grow from stage actor to cultural icon, refused to bow to that system, they saw it for what it was. A reckoning. In barbershops and church basements, in quiet homes across Georgia, Ohio, New Jersey, and Louisiana, people weren't talking about gossip. They were talking about honor. He didn't clap back, said one retired Marine. He didn't get emotional, added a former teacher. He just told the truth, with his feet. Even longtime anchors began reassessing their tone. Gayle King referenced the moment in a behind-the-scenes meeting. According to sources, we can't assume access is owed. People are tired of being handled. Strahan returned to the GMA desk 2 weeks later. No mention of the moment. No acknowledgement of the backlash. But something in him had changed. The smile was thinner. The banter, shorter. He no longer reached across the table during interviews. He no longer leaned in with that overly familiar tone. Because he understood now. Some people don't need your stage. Some people walk in with their own. And the moment you mistake a man's silence for submission, you've already lost control of the room. As for Denzel, he said nothing. No follow-up interviews. No PR statements. No Instagram posts. He returned to his quiet life. To his films. To his family. To his faith. And in doing so, delivered the final, silent message. I don't owe you more than I'm willing to give. For many Americans, it was a reminder that power doesn't always raise its voice. That real men don't perform vulnerability, they protect it. That there's still a place in the world for those who know who they are and don't need a microphone to prove it. 2 months later, GMA's viewership dipped again. A quiet drop, but persistent. Analysts blamed market trends, younger audiences, algorithm shifts. But the truth was simpler. They lost trust, not because they made a mistake, but because they didn't recognize dignity when it stood right in front of them and said, no. And that, for millions of Americans, was the final lesson. In a world addicted to noise, performance, and applause, sometimes the loudest statement you can make is to get up and walk away.